The fluorescent lights of the Sterling Tower hummed with a sterile indifference, casting long, sharp shadows over the polished marble floors. Every night, as the city outside dimmed to a mosaic of glittering lights, Alara Vance moved through the empty offices, a ghost in a uniform, her presence as unobtrusive as the night itself. In her late 30s, Alara possessed a quiet dignity that seemed at odds with the mop and bucket often clutched in her hands. Her movements were precise, almost meditative, as if each swipe of her cloth was a deliberate stroke in a larger, unseen masterpiece. Her own apartment, a small, meticulously kept space in a brick building several subway stops away, was a sanctuary from the high-gloss indifference of her workday. It was filled not with the cold, modern art found in the offices she cleaned, but with cherished vintage treasures, a faded Persian rug, a carefully mended armchair, and a collection of old jazz records that she played on a turntable gifted to her years ago. On silent evenings, the only sound was the gentle hiss and crackle of vinyl, a comforting backdrop to her solitary rituals. Tonight, a subtle mournfulness in a trumpet solo filled the air as Alara polished a single antique teacup, its delicate porcelain gleaming under the soft glow of a standing lamp. Each meticulous buff of the cloth against the cup's rim was a quiet conversation, a shared moment with the object's history, far more intimate than any she had with the fleeting occupants of the tower. Her worn but impeccably clean uniform hung on a hook by the door, a testament to her steadfast pride in her work, despite its humble nature. One crisp Tuesday evening, as Alara navigated the labyrinthine corridors of the Sterling Tower, her keen eyes caught a glint of light under a CEO's sprawling desk. It was a necklace, intricate and sparkling with what appeared to be genuine diamonds and sapphires, undoubtedly a forgotten expensive bauble. Most people wouldn't have noticed it in the dim evening light, or if they had, might have been tempted by its value. But Alara, without a moment's hesitation, carefully retrieved it. She didn't marvel at its beauty or its worth. Her mind went straight to the owner's potential distress. The next morning, she promptly reported her find to building security, patiently filling out forms and ensuring its safe return. When the owner, a flustered socialite who barely registered Alara's presence, offered a generous cash reward, Alara politely but firmly declined. It was simply the right thing to do, she stated, her voice quiet but firm, leaving the bewildered socialite with an impression of unwavering integrity. This small, selfless act, performed without expectation or fanfare, was a quiet testament to her unwavering character, a glimpse into the moral compass that guided her every action. Sometimes, as she dusted the vast, echoing reception areas, a low, rich hum would escape Alara's lips. It was never a popular song, never anything from the modern charts. Instead, it was an opera aria, her voice a surprising instrument, trained and powerful, carrying a melodic elegance that seemed out of place in the sterile corporate environment. Her hands, calloused from years of gripping mops and scrubbing brushes, would sometimes pause, fingers tracing the elaborate patterns on a priceless tapestry, or the delicate brushstrokes of a Renaissance painting. It was a momentary, almost unconscious grace, hinting at a sensitivity and refinement that went far beyond her daily duties. Tucked away in a drawer in her apartment, carefully wrapped in silk, lay an old, leather-bound music score, its pages brittle with age and filled with meticulous handwritten annotations in an elegant, almost forgotten script. This score was a silent echo of a life unlived, a talent suppressed, a past shrouded in quiet mystery. She would touch the cover sometimes, a wistful expression clouding her eyes, before tucking it away again. On the 30th floor, in an office overlooking Central Park, Mr. Julian Thorne, a junior executive whose arrogance far outstripped his achievements, often made his disdain for the cleaning staff overtly clear. He saw them as an interchangeable, invisible entity, a necessary inconvenience to maintain his pristine workspace. He'd leave passive-aggressive notes about dust motes, or deliberately leave his office a mess, as if testing their subservience. His snide comments about the help were a regular feature of his conversations with colleagues, reinforcing his own inflated sense of social hierarchy. He believed deeply in the rigid social strata, and people like Alara belonged firmly at the bottom. Each year, the building's wealthiest resident, Mr. Sterling Hayes, a philanthropic millionaire known for his eccentricities and lavish, themed parties, hosted an annual gala. Ilara, often tasked with preparing the event spaces before the guests arrived and cleaning up the glittering wreckage afterwards, was an unseen witness to these spectacular displays of wealth and excess. She would move through the grand ballroom before dawn, carefully collecting forgotten champagne flutes and discarded floral arrangements, observing the remnants of glamour and frivolity, a silent chronicler of a world so far removed from her own. She saw the designer gowns, the priceless jewelry, the fleeting laughter, and then the quiet aftermath, a poignant reminder of both fleeting beauty and inevitable decay. The hum of the Sterling Tower's air conditioning seemed to amplify the hushed, almost reverent tones emanating from Mr. Sterling Hayes's penthouse office. Ilara, diligently polishing the gleaming brass elevator doors a few floors below, overheard snippets of conversation through the slight crack of a closing door. Laughter, the clink of crystal, and the resonant voice of Mr. Hayes himself. He was renowned not just for his wealth, but for his peculiar sense of humor and his habit of observing the little people, as he sometimes referred to the building's support staff, with a detached, almost scientific curiosity. Inside the penthouse, gathered around a mahogany table laden with expensive cigars and single malt scotch, sat Mr. Hayes and a select group of his socialite friends and business associates. The conversation had drifted, as it often did among this set, to the intricacies of social status, the unspoken rules of their elite circle, and the amusing notion of the unseen working class. A snide remark from a particularly haughty socialite about the drudgery of the cleaning staff sparked an idea in Mr. Hayes's mind. A mischievous glint appeared in his eye. "You know," he drawled, a thin smile playing on his lips, "I've often wondered about the lives of those who keep our world pristine. The quiet ones. The ones we barely notice." He paused, letting the statement hang in the air. Then, with an impulsive gesture born of boredom and a desire to stir the pot, he declared, "I'm going to invite one of them to my annual gala. The cleaning lady. Just as a lark, a social experiment. It'll be quite the spectacle, won't it?" His friends chuckled, exchanging amused glances, none of them truly believing he'd go through with it. It was a joke, a lighthearted, albeit condescending social experiment intended to provide fodder for their next brunch. A few days later, a thick, cream-colored envelope, embossed with the Sterling Hayes crest, arrived at Ilara's humble apartment. Her name, Ilara Vance, was elegantly inscribed on the front. She stared at it, bewildered, then slowly opened it. Inside, nestled on a bed of tissue paper, was a formal, engraved invitation to Mr. Sterling Hayes's exclusive annual High Society Gala. The date, the time, the dress code. Black tie and evening gowns, all meticulously detailed. Her initial reaction was a potent cocktail of shock, disbelief, and a profound sense of humiliation. She read it again, then a third time, her fingers tracing the formal script. A chilling realization dawned on her. This wasn't a genuine invitation born of respect. It was a jest, a cruel joke at her expense, a public spectacle designed to entertain the very people whose discarded wrappers she collected. The thought of stepping into that glittering alien world, exposed and ridiculed, filled her with a dread so profound it stole her breath. She imagined the whispers, the condescending smiles, the blatant stares. The carefully constructed peace of her solitary life, the quiet dignity she clung to, was shattered by this audacious intrusion. She felt utterly naked, vulnerable to the judgment of a world that had always chosen to see her as invisible. For days, Ilara agonized. She considered simply ignoring the invitation, letting it slip silently into the oblivion of forgotten mail. Or perhaps a polite, well-worded decline, citing an unavoidable prior engagement. She felt a deep-seated fear of ridicule, an instinct to retreat into the shadows, to remain the unseen presence she had always been. But as she stared at the gleaming invitation, its heavy cardstock feeling like a challenge in her hand, something shifted within her. A forgotten spark of defiance buried under years of quiet acceptance and humility began to ignite. A memory, fleeting but sharp, surfaced. A moment from her youth, perhaps a harsh word, a dismissive glance, or a vibrant suppressed aspiration, connected to the old, leather-bound music score she cherished. The invitation, though meant as a slight, also awakened a long-suppressed desire to prove herself, not just to them, but to herself. She wouldn't be the butt of a joke. She would reclaim her own narrative. After days of internal battle, a quiet resolve settled over Ilara. She decided, against every fiber of her initial being, that she would attend. This was not for Mr. Hayes, not for his snickering friends, but for herself. She would not be a pawn in their game. She would face their judgment head-on. Her decision to accept the invitation, knowing the potential for public humiliation, marked the precise moment her ordinary life was irrevocably changed. There was no turning back, no retreating into her quiet anonymity. The die was cast. Ilara Vance, the cleaning lady, was going to the gala. Meanwhile, Mr. Julian Thorne, the arrogant junior executive, had been privy to Mr. Hayes's joke invitation. He couldn't contain his snickers as he recounted the story to his colleagues during their lunch break. "Can you imagine?" he'd scoffed, leaning back in his chair, a self-satisfied smirk on his face. "That old cleaning lady, in the same room as us. She'll either not show up, too intimidated, or if she does, she'll be a clumsy, awkward spectacle. Another testament to the utter gulf between us and them." He saw it as confirmation of his own superior social standing, a hilarious reaffirmation of the rigid class structure he so fervently believed in. He was eager for the show. The night of Mr. Sterling Hayes's annual gala shimmered with an almost palpable sense of expectation. The grand ballroom of his penthouse, usually a sterile expanse of polished marble for Ilara, was now a dazzling tableau of opulence. Chandeliers dripped crystal light, illuminating a sea of designer gowns, bespoke suits, and the glittering jewels of the city's elite. The air hummed with the murmur of sophisticated chatter, the clink of champagne flutes, and the soft strains of a string quartet. Amidst the swirling elegance, a hush fell, almost imperceptibly at first, then spreading like a ripple through the room. Heads turned towards the grand entrance. Expecting, perhaps, a spectacle of awkwardness, a caricature of the uninvited guest, many were momentarily stunned. Ilara Vance entered, not in her cleaning uniform, but transformed. She wore an elegant, understated gown of deep sapphire blue, its fabric flowing with a quiet grace that needed no overt embellishment. It was a dress that whispered of classic beauty, perhaps a cherished heirloom carefully preserved, or a meticulously saved purchase for a dream she hadn't dared to voice. Her hair, usually pulled back in a simple bun, was styled in soft, sophisticated waves, framing a face that, though showing the subtle lines of a life lived, now radiated an unexpected poise. Her posture was erect, dignified, without a hint of defensiveness or discomfort. She looked stunning, yes, but not overtly flashy. A woman of quiet confidence, not a peacock seeking attention. She was simply, undeniably, beautiful, in a way that commanded respect, not ridicule. Julian Thorne, who had positioned himself near the entrance, a self-satisfied smirk ready for the anticipated spectacle, found his jaw go slack. His eyes, initially alight with smug anticipation, widened in disbelief. This was not the clumsy, awkward figure he had conjured in his mind. This was an apparition of grace. He quickly recovered, a flush creeping up his neck. "Well, well," he sneered, attempting to regain his composure, his voice a little too loud. "If it isn't the new guest, did you manage to find your way through the service entrance? Or did Mr. Hayes finally install a special ramp for staff?" He made a dismissive gesture towards her elegant dress. "I do hope that's not one of the dry cleaning bags from our offices, is it?" Ilara met his gaze calmly, a slight, knowing smile playing on her lips. It was a smile that held no malice, only an ancient wisdom and a hint of pity. Her voice, when she spoke, was low and clear, cutting through the general hum of the room like a silver thread. "Mr. Thorne," she said, her eyes never leaving his. "It is always fascinating how quickly some people assume a person's worth is measured by the door they enter through, rather than the character they carry within." She paused, letting the subtle barb land. "And no, this gown is not from your dry cleaning. I assure you it's quite accustomed to a different kind of company than laundry hampers." Her retort was witty, insightful, and delivered with such serene confidence that Julian, caught completely off guard, could only stammer, his face turning a deeper shade of crimson. He had expected a cowering, defensive response, not such poised intellectual demolition. Alara hadn't raised her voice or lost her composure. Her very poise and elegant wit were her quiet weapons, disarming him utterly. This initial confrontation established her undeniable dignity and completely shattered the attendees' preconceived notions. Only a few people truly registered the profound shift. Julian Thorne, now red-faced and sputtering, was one. Mr. Hayes, who had been observing from a distance with a flicker of intrigue, now found himself genuinely absorbed, a small, knowing smile playing on his own lips. His joke was certainly backfiring, but in a far more interesting way than he'd anticipated. And then there was Mrs. Eleanor Beaumont, an elderly, discerning patron of the arts, known for her sharp mind and even sharper eye for genuine talent. From her vantage point by the grand piano, she had noticed Ilara's entry, her quiet elegance, and the calm, intelligent glint in her eyes. Mrs. Beaumont, a long-time admirer of true character over superficial display, was captivated. She watched the exchange with Thorne, a slight smile gracing her lips, and a spark of curiosity ignited within her. This woman was clearly more than she appeared. Later in the evening, as the gala pulsed with energy, a sudden ripple of panic spread through the room. The renowned opera singer scheduled to perform that night had, at the last minute, canceled due to a sudden illness. A frantic search for a replacement ensued. Mr. Hayes, ever the showman, though perhaps also still testing the boundaries of his social experiment, called out playfully, his voice echoing slightly in the vast room. "Well, this is a pickle. Does anyone here possess the vocal prowess to entertain our esteemed guests?" He glanced around, his eyes momentarily landing on Ilara, who was now engaged in a quiet, polite conversation with Mrs. Beaumont. Mrs. Beaumont, her keen mind piecing together Ilara's earlier poised demeanor, and perhaps remembering that subtle hum of an aria she'd once heard, or noticing the way Ilara's eyes had lingered on the grand piano earlier, suddenly spoke up. "Mr. Hayes," she said, her voice carrying an unexpected conviction, "I believe our esteemed new guest, Ms. Vance, might just be able to help you. She has a certain presence, an aura that suggests hidden depths." Mr. Hayes, intrigued by Mrs. Beaumont's endorsement, raised an eyebrow. He paused, then, with a playful, almost daring gesture, extended a hand towards Ilara. "Ms. Vance, would you do us the honor? A little song to entertain your fellow guests?" Ilara felt a sudden lurch in her stomach. The silence around her seemed to grow, every eye in the room now fixed on her. She hesitated, a fleeting wave of fear washing over her. The pressure was immense, the memories of a life unchosen, a path abandoned, flashing through her mind. Her eyes briefly met Mrs. Beaumont's, and in the older woman's gaze, she found not judgment, but a quiet, unwavering encouragement. A deep breath, a decisive nod. I would be honored, Mr. Hayes." She walked to the magnificent grand piano, its polished surface reflecting the chandeliers above. Her steps were steady, her posture regal. Without preamble and without accompaniment, she began to sing an a cappella opera aria. The first note, pure and resonant, seemed to float effortlessly into the air, silencing every conversation, every murmur. Her voice, rich, powerful, and perfectly trained, filled the opulent room. It was not merely a good voice, it was a voice of immense beauty, professional caliber, honed by years of practice, imbued with a raw emotion that transcended the technical perfection. Each note was a testament to a talent that had been carefully hidden, a legacy that had long been dormant. It was the voice of a true artist, demanding attention, commanding respect. Julian Thorne was utterly flabbergasted. His jaw dropped, a comical expression of disbelief and intense envy contorting his face. He looked around wildly, desperate to find someone else equally shocked, someone to share his disbelief. But every face in the room was mesmerized, transfixed by the sheer power and beauty of Ilara's voice. His carefully constructed world of social superiority, built on the assumption of Ilara's inferiority, began to crumble around him. He desperately tried to find a flaw, a missed note, a misstep, something to latch onto and dismiss, but there was nothing. Her performance was flawless, undeniable. His prejudice was directly challenged by an undeniable, breathtaking display of pure talent. As Alara's powerful voice reached its crescendo, her hand gestured gracefully, almost instinctively, in time with the music. A simple, elegant silver ring on her finger, almost hidden beneath the cuff of her sleeve, caught the brilliant light of the chandelier. Mrs. Beaumont, whose eyes had been fixed on Alara's face, now noticed the ring. Her eyes widened slightly in a sudden, profound recognition, as if she had seen that particular style before, or knew its deep, unspoken significance. The ring was a quiet echo of Alara's past, a subtle but critical clue to her true, forgotten identity, a secret that was about to unravel. Alara Vance's impromptu performance at Mr. Hayes's gala quickly became the most talked-about event in New York's high society. Whispers followed her, a strange mix of awe and disbelief. The cleaning lady? An opera singer? The story spread like wildfire, fueled by social media and hushed phone calls. But amidst the burgeoning fascination, a discordant note was struck by Julian Thorne. Humiliated and enraged by Alara's undeniable triumph, he became her most virulent detractor. Desperate to regain his lost social standing and undermine her blossoming reputation, he began subtly spreading rumors, sowing seeds of doubt. It was a fluke, he'd scoff to anyone who would listen, his voice dripping with condescension. Or perhaps she was lip-syncing. One cannot simply be a cleaning lady one day and an opera diva the next. She's likely a con artist, trying to infiltrate our circles for financial gain. He used his connections, whispered in the ears of powerful figures in the city's arts scene, twisting the narrative until a subtle undercurrent of skepticism began to tarnish the initial wonder. His machinations culminated in a public challenge. Thorne, leveraging his influence on the board of a prominent charity, arranged a charity concert just a few weeks later. Ostensibly, it was to showcase new talent and support the arts, but its true insidious purpose was to set Alara up for a spectacular failure. He ensured the venue was none other than the historic Grand Lyra Opera House, a revered institution steeped in tradition, known for hosting only the most established and elite performers. This was no ordinary stage. It was a hallowed ground for vocal titans, a place where Alara, with her cleaning lady past, was fundamentally an outsider. The irony of her performing on such a sacred stage, under such intense scrutiny, amplified the tension to a nearly unbearable degree. To further guarantee a public humiliation, Thorne personally invited Mr. Alistair Finch, a renowned, notoriously critical music critic whose scathing reviews could make or break a career. He wanted to watch Alara crumble under the pressure. Backstage at the Grand Lyra, the air was thick with nervous energy and the hushed chatter of stagehands. Alara, dressed in a simple yet elegant black gown, prepared in a small, stark dressing room, acutely aware of the whispers that still followed her. She could practically feel Julian Thorne's smug presence somewhere in the vast audience. The weight of expectation was immense, a heavy cloak draped over her shoulders. She was utterly alone, save for the comforting presence of Mrs. Eleanor Beaumont, who sat quietly in a corner, offering only a steady, encouraging gaze, a silent anchor in the swirling chaos. "Breathe, my dear," Mrs. Beaumont murmured softly, her voice a balm. "Remember why you sing. For yourself. For the music." The pressure was palpable. The program was being live-streamed, and a strict, unyielding time slot had been allocated for her performance. Just minutes before her cue, a wave of cold dread washed over Alara. The stage manager, flustered, rushed in. "Ms. Vance, we have a problem. The main microphone feedback is erratic, and your sheet music for Visidarte seems to have vanished." Alara's heart hammered against her ribs. This was no accident. It was Thorne's doing, a calculated attempt to rattle her, to ensure her failure. She took a deep, shaky breath. No sheet music and a faulty mic. She would have to perform a cappella, relying solely on her memory and training, a daunting prospect even for seasoned professionals. There was no time to fix anything. She had to go on. Alara stepped onto the enormous stage, bathed in the blinding glare of the spotlights. The vast auditorium, filled to capacity, seemed to hold its breath. The silence of the expectant crowd was deafening, a thick, palpable entity that pressed down on her. She could feel every eye, every critical gaze, especially those of Julian Thorne and Mr. Alistair Finch, piercing through the darkness. She chose a demanding, technically challenging aria, one that Madame Solange Dubois herself had famously performed, Vici d'arte, vici d'amore, from Puccini's Tosca. It was a piece known for its emotional depth and a particularly challenging high note that few dared to attempt without perfect conditions. She began, her voice initially trembling ever so slightly, a fleeting vulnerability. She felt the weight of years, of hidden talent, of unfulfilled dreams pressing down on her. The raw emotion of the aria, a lament of an artist who lives for art and love but is plunged into despair, mirrored her own journey. Every note, every breath, every nuance was scrutinized. Thorne watched intently from his box, a triumphant smirk slowly spreading across his face as he imagined her inevitable stumble. Then came the moment of ultimate testing. As Ilara approached the famed, almost impossible high B-flat, a sudden, piercing cough erupted from somewhere in the audience, deliberately loud, designed to throw her off. It was a calculated disruption. For a terrifying beat, Ilara's voice wavered, a ghost of a crack threatening to shatter the delicate harmony. Her eyes, wide with a fleeting panic, darted towards the source of the noise. Julian Thorne leaned forward, his smirk widening into a full, triumphant grin. Convinced she was about to fail, to publicly crumble under the weight of his machinations. The Grand Lyra Opera House was a cathedral of silence, every ear straining, every breath held. Ilara's voice, which had soared with such powerful emotion, wavered as she approached the impossible high B-flat in Vici d'arte. The deliberate, piercing cough from the audience, a calculated sabotage by Thorne, echoed like a gunshot. Julian Thorne, from his box, leaned forward, a triumphant, venomous smirk spreading across his face, his eyes gleaming with the certainty of her imminent failure. For a terrifying, agonizing beat, it seemed all was lost. The collective gasp from the audience was almost audible, a wave of disappointment washing over the silent hall. Ilara's face, captured by the intense spotlights, registered a fleeting flicker of raw despair, a memory of a past defeat, a whisper of a life she thought she'd left behind. But then, something shifted within her. It was not just a surge of defiance, but a profound, almost visceral connection to the music itself, to the long-dormant artistry that was her birthright. Her eyes, which had darted nervously, now closed for a fraction of a second, as if to commune with an unseen force. When they reopened, they burned with an intense, unshakable focus, utterly oblivious to the hostile gaze of Thorne or the expectant silence of the crowd. With a powerful, almost desperate inhalation, Ilara Vance found her footing. Her voice, which had threatened to crack, suddenly, miraculously, soared. It wasn't just a sound, it was a revelation. Pure and resonant, it filled every corner of the immense opera house, not merely reaching the challenging high note, but hitting it with astonishing clarity, and holding it, flawlessly and unwavering, for an impossibly long time. It hung in the air, a luminous, perfect sphere of sound, defying gravity, defying expectation, defying all the petty machinations that had sought to bring her down. Every single nuanced vocal inflection, every powerful projection, every subtle gesture of her hand, now flowed with an almost superhuman grace and control. The raw emotion of the aria, her struggle and her triumph, poured out, transforming the Grand Lyra into a sacred space, a vessel for her incredible artistry. The final notes of Vici d'arte reverberated through the hall, a stunning crescendo that seemed to hang in the air long after she finished. The silence that followed was profound, absolute, as if the audience had forgotten to breathe. Then, like a dam breaking, it shattered. The transformation of the crowd was vivid, immediate, and overwhelming. Julian Thorne's triumphant smirk, frozen on his face, slowly contorted into a mask of pure shock and then utter, crushing humiliation. His jaw hung open, his eyes wide, vacant with disbelief. He sank back into his seat, a small, defeated figure, his carefully constructed world of superiority crumbling around him. his defeat etched onto his pale face. Mr. Sterling Hayes, who had leaned forward anxiously, now rose slowly to his feet, a look of profound respect and genuine awe replacing his usual playful eccentricity. He led the thunderous standing ovation, his hands clapping with an almost furious intensity. The notoriously critical music critic, Mr. Alistair Finch, who had been scribbling furiously in his notebook throughout the first half of the concert, now dropped his pen with a clatter. His face, usually a mask of detached cynicism, was suddenly awash with emotion, tears glistening in his eyes. He too rose, joining the roaring applause, his silence a more powerful testament than any review he could have written. Murmurs of incredible, a legend reborn, and unbelievable swept through the hall, growing into a deafening roar of adoration. Faces shifted from skepticism to astonishment, then to unadulterated admiration, tears streaming down many cheeks. The sheer force of their collective recognition, the thunderous applause, and the visible emotion in their faces confirmed Ilara's absolute victory, her undeniable talent, and her complete vindication. As Ilara, her chest heaving slightly from the exertion, bowed deeply, the stage lights caught the simple, elegant silver ring on her finger. Mr. Alistair Finch, his eyes still shining with emotion, caught sight of it. He gasped audibly. He knew that ring. Its unique design, a stylized lyre intertwined with a single blossoming rose, was unmistakable. It was the signet ring of the legendary opera diva, Madame Solange Dubois, a voice that had captivated the world decades ago, before she mysteriously disappeared from the public eye after a devastating personal tragedy. A wave of realization, sharp and undeniable, washed over him. He, a lifelong admirer of Dubois, suddenly understood. Ilara Vance was not just a cleaning lady who could sing. She was the long-lost daughter of Madame Solange Dubois, carrying on her mother's extraordinary, almost mythical legacy. The truth, revealed by that single gleaming ring, elevated Ilara from a surprising talent to a living legend, the rightful, powerful heir to a revered artistic lineage. The thunderous applause eventually subsided, replaced by a reverent hush as Ilara Vance, now standing at the precipice of a new destiny, exited the stage. The aftermath of her performance was a whirlwind of emotions, a sudden, blinding spotlight after years in the shadows. Julian Thorne's downfall was swift and humiliating. His attempts to discredit Ilara had spectacularly backfired, exposing him not as a discerning critic, but as a petty, prejudiced man. The powerful music critic, Mr. Alistair Finch, wasted no time in publishing a scathing review of Thorne's behavior, subtly hinting at his sabotage and celebrating Ilara's triumph with an almost poetic zeal. Thorne's connections, once his lifeline, now became his undoing. He was publicly shunned, losing lucrative business deals, and ultimately, his position at the prestigious firm. His snobbish attitudes, once tolerated, now echoed with hollow irony in the city's social circles. He became a pariah, his snide remarks about the help, now a chilling reminder of his own moral bankruptcy. There was no public apology from him, no grand act of contrition, only a quiet, bitter descent into irrelevance, a fitting end for a man whose arrogance had blinded him to true talent. For Ilara, however, a cascade of opportunities unfurled. Offers poured in from every direction. Major opera houses vied for her presence. Prestigious record labels clamored for a contract, and concert venues across the globe extended invitations. It was an overwhelming, exhilarating deluge, a true recognition of her extraordinary talent. She carefully considered each offer, no longer seeking mere survival, but a chance to fully embrace her destiny, to live the life she was always meant to live. She ultimately accepted a leading role in an upcoming major opera production at the Metropolitan Opera, a role that promised not just a career, but a grand stage for her resurrected artistry. This wasn't just a job, it was the reclamation of a dream, the fulfilling of a potential she had suppressed for so long. Mr. Sterling Hayes, genuinely humbled by her talent and the profound realization of her true lineage, became one of her staunchest patrons, offering not just financial backing but genuine social support, ensuring she had every resource to flourish. He had set out to make a joke, but in doing so, he had unearthed a legend. A few days after the concert, Alara sat across from Mrs. Eleanor Beaumont in a quiet cafe, the clatter of porcelain and the murmur of conversation a soothing backdrop to their intimate discussion. Mrs. Beaumont's eyes, soft with affection, held a knowing light. "My dear Alara," she began, her voice gentle, "I recognized your mother's ring. Solange and we were close many years ago. She was a force of nature, a voice unparalleled, and so fiercely private after everything." Mrs. Beaumont delicately alluded to the family tragedy that had caused Madame Dubois to withdraw from the public eye, hinting at the burden Alara had carried unknowingly for so long. "You carry her legacy, not just in your voice, but in your quiet strength, your integrity." Alara's gaze lingered on her silver ring, now polished to a brilliant sheen, a symbol of connection rather than a hidden secret. "I remember glimpses," she confessed, her voice a soft murmur, "of music, of a grand house filled with laughter. Then only the quiet, the need to disappear, to become invisible." She spoke of her years as a cleaning lady, the methodical routine that had served as a protective shell, a way to remain unseen, to avoid the probing questions about her past. "I thought that part of me was gone forever, that the music had simply faded." Mrs. Beaumont reached across the table, her hand gently covering Alara's. "No, my dear. True art, true talent, never truly fades. It simply waits for the right moment, for the courage to re-emerge." She paused, a gentle smile gracing her lips. "And you, Alara, found that courage. You've journeyed through the quiet, through the shadows, and now you've stepped into the light, not just as a singer, but as your mother's daughter, reclaiming a legacy that was always yours." Alara looked out the window, at the bustling city, no longer a place of anonymity, but of possibility. The conversation had been a catharsis, a profound moment of understanding and acceptance. She reflected on her journey, the initial fear and humiliation of Mr. Hayes's joke, the unexpected triumph on stage, and the profound joy of finally being seen for who she truly was, not just as the cleaning lady, but as Alara Vance, artist and inheritor of a legendary voice. A profound sense of peace settled over her, a quiet confidence that radiated from within. 2 years later, the name Alara Vance graced marquees across the globe, synonymous with operatic brilliance and a captivating stage presence. She was no longer just a cleaning lady who could sing. She was a celebrated international opera star, her voice soaring through the hallowed halls of La Scala, the Royal Opera House, and of course the Metropolitan Opera, where her debut had been met with a fervent standing ovation. She balanced her demanding career with a newfound personal peace, a quiet dignity now complemented by a radiant confidence that shimmered in her every movement. Her small apartment, a symbol of her former life, had been lovingly sold, and she now resided in a beautiful, spacious home overlooking Central Park, a place that resonated with light and tranquility. Yet, within its grander walls, she still kept her cherished vintage items: the worn Persian rug, the mended armchair, and the old turntable, which still played scratchy jazz records on quiet evenings. And there, on a place of honor, rested the old leather-bound music score, its yellowed pages a testament to her journey. She wore her mother's silver ring proudly on her finger, no longer hidden but gleaming brilliantly, a visible symbol of her heritage and the extraordinary path she had forged. Alara, acutely aware of the serendipitous turn her life had taken, was determined to ensure that others, especially those from underserved communities, had the opportunities she had once lacked. She established the Solange Dubois Legacy Fund, a charitable foundation dedicated to supporting aspiring young artists from underprivileged backgrounds. The fund provided scholarships for music education, mentorship programs with established artists, and access to performance venues. Alara personally taught master classes, her expressive hands guiding trembling young voices, her eyes alight with wisdom and compassion. She often spoke about the importance of perseverance, the courage to embrace one's true self, and the understanding that talent, no matter where it originated, deserved the chance to flourish. She ensured that the next generation would not have to hide their gifts, as she once had. The story concludes with Alara, not on a grand stage performing, but in a sun-drenched rehearsal hall at the New York Academy of Arts, surrounded by a group of eager young students. Their faces, a diverse tapestry of hope and curiosity, were alight as she patiently explained the nuances of breath control and emotional expression in an aria. Her smile was warm, her gaze encouraging. The silver ring on her finger caught the morning light, glinting as she gestured. In the background, a large, beautifully rendered portrait of Madame Solange Dubois, her mother, hung proudly on the wall, her eyes seeming to gaze down with profound pride and quiet affirmation. The final image is of Alara, her hand extended in an inviting gesture towards the hopeful faces of the next generation, symbolizing the passing of the torch, the enduring power of art, and the ultimate triumph of spirit over adversity. If this story stirred your heart, if it reminds you that courage can alter destinies, and that light always finds a path, even in the deepest darkness, please leave a comment. Share this story with those who need inspiration. Like, subscribe, and hit the bell to never miss our upcoming stories.